Hey everybody, welcome back to the Metal Mill 52 YouTube channel. My name is Bill. This is my workshop. We're working on an LBSC Tich locomotive, a little 3.5 inch gauge live steam locomotive. I'm going to call this week's episode Erecting the Cylinders, which if you're following along in the book, there's actually a section on it called that, and on page 81 it starts. And I remember when I was reading the book, contemplating the project, I was like, well, that's kind of an odd thing. Why would you have a big deal about that? I mean, for the larger locomotive that I built already, you just bolt the cylinders on, bolt all the rest of the stuff on that you've made, a little bit of fitting, and away you go. But in this one, it's interesting because you'll see in this episode the cylinders. Here's the cylinders and the steam chests, valve rods that we made last time. The guide bars are here, and the side rod, the connecting rods, the piston rods, crosshead, connecting rods here. Interesting. These things are kind of one unit. You can't just unfasten a piece of it and take it off. It all kind of fits together. You'll see that as we assemble it in the episode, but there was a lot of fitment that went on, just generally making everything so that there's no interference. That was the first thing I tackled. The second thing was putting the actual graphited yarn on the pistons. You'll see that. And then the mounting of the guide bars and the guide bar brackets here. I covered that as well. So making progress with it. It's coming along pretty well. And I think this will be a good episode for kind of understanding the overall mechanics, all the different pieces that go into the locomotive, the different, like the engine side of it. After this, I mean, the goal is to get it running on air, so we're getting much closer. The next things we'll do would be machining these T's, the intake and exhaust T's, and some piping that goes with them, and fixing the lubricating system. So we're getting close. I appreciate everybody being on board. If you have a question, please ask. I'll do my best to answer it. If you don't have a question, but you just want to let me know that you've watched and you're interested, just give me a thumbs up if you would, please. That always is encouraging to me. And as always, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and pass the word if you know somebody that's interested in stuff like this. Always happy to have more subscribers. So thanks everybody. We appreciate you watching. Hope you have a great week. Take care. Okay, here's the opposite side one. And I don't have the pin in here. I'm going to have to take the cylinders off to put the pins in. But this is interesting to see. Hopefully you can see this. I'm going to hold it in place. I've got it at, it's coming all the way back to the rear of travel, the rear dead center, if you will. And I can feel the piston in there. The good news is it hasn't bottomed out against the inside faces. That's a big plus. And here we go, moving it forward in the travel. Hopefully that'll show up on the video. Look at that. There we go. It is so perfect. I must have just made the other one way too long for some odd crazy reason, but this thing, that's just about right. You can place I ran this through once before I took the cylinder cover off, and it doesn't hit the cylinder cover on the inside. I'm going to have to take a measurement of this, and I'll take this apart and measure the piston rod too. But that's how it's supposed to work. But again, you can see it's the beauty of having the 3.5 inch gauge and be able to flip it around and manipulate the parts just like that. Makes it a lot of fun. Just use the digital calipers to use the tail of it to take a depth reading here. And this is interesting to me. It's like right at, hang on a second. Well, it was right at 100 a second ago. I jostled it a little bit, but I think that's perfect. So with a 98, 100,000 clearance, when this is at full forward travel, if this thing is a 1/16 of an inch, obviously that's 63 thou, so that gives about 30 thousandths total clearance. And of course there's another 16 thou with the gasket. So I think that's what I'll be shooting for when I fix this side, but I think the good news is the right side is good to go. A little bit of good news on the apparent over long piston rod that was causing the piston to, I'm not sure what exactly was going on there, but actually if I advance the travel all the way, this is front dead center for this set of pistons and rods. I've got the piston rod all the way, or connecting rods I should say, got the piston rod all the way seated in the crosshead, and the piston is just like the other one, it's just shy of the little vents, the little steam vents that we made. So that was not the issue. I don't know what was exactly giving me the other indication. I guess that I may not have had the piston rod all the way in the crosshead before, but I did find in experimenting that I had another issue. There was interference with this countersunk screw here and the crosshead itself. So I filed the crosshead down, I filed the little countersunk screw down. I think I need to deepen that countersink right here, because as you can see, now I've got it just, let's see if it, yeah, it's just making a little bit of contact right there still. And of course I don't have the pins in. So that, I think, was actually the culprit, not the piston rod length. I just think the piston rod was not stuck all the way in there. That's the apparent issue before. But I do need to work on the clearance a little bit with that countersunk screw, and that should solve our movement problem. Okay, I'm pretty pleased. I took that out and I deepened the countersink. I also filed a little bit off the back of the crosshead just to give it a little extra breathing room. And now let me walk it through the whole paces, excuse me, the full rotation. I don't have the pin in, that's why I've got my finger in here, keeping the pressure between the piston rod and the actual connecting rod. And I don't know if this will show up on the video, but there is a good, well, it's not a heck of a lot of clearance there, but there's a little bit of clearance that allows that between the crosshead and the forward pin. So there we go. That's good news. It was not the piston rod itself. I'm guessing what was causing it to stick out earlier in the video that I shot this morning was that I didn't have the piston rod pushed all the way back. It doesn't need to be pushed all the way back, but there's a whole adjustment in the book they talk about for giving the proper clearance in the front when the wheels are at front dead center for that pin. So I'll adjust it some more, but problem solved, and it's not the piston rod length, so I'm pretty happy about that. I just wanted to show an interesting thing. I had both sets of cylinders on here, and now I can see why LBSC went into such detail about erecting the cylinders. He calls it in the book. But part of the problem, well, part of the reason I wasn't that worried about it for mine was I already had the cylinder holes drilled, and in fact they were mounted when I bought the set of castings. So I really wasn't worried about the placement of them. But what I realized is that the when everything is bolted together, there's no flexibility. You can't remove the connecting rod. So the connecting rod and cylinder are basically placed up as one unit. And so I had them both on there, and after adjusting the clearance issues and so forth, I twirled through. Let me walk around here. And as I've demonstrated a couple times, I've walked the cylinders through their travel, the pistons, and I had to fix some clearance issues on this side around the front of the connecting rod with the crosshead. So I fixed that. Let me push that back in, and you can see. So now the travel, it's pretty smooth. There's no real binding, actually. Yeah, no real binding there. There was binding though on the both of them when I had both sets on there. So I just simply removed one side completely just to see if if I still had binding or not. And so now that there's smooth travel with that one side removed, I'm pretty certain that there's binding issues with what is the right hand side of cylinder. So I'll have to adjust that, probably just filing a few things down, making a little bit more clearance. But that's an easy approach to it. Just take a whole side off, because interestingly, a locomotive, basically a two-cylinder locomotive, is basically just two steam engines that are mounted parallel to each other, and that's why you get the whole timing issue and the chug 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 noise. So anyway, and the whole quartering of the wheels and the lead lag, that's all has to do with the process of operation of the steam engine. So anyway, pointed that out. Now that I'm happy that I've isolated that it's not this side anymore, that it's that side, so I'll work on the clearances and bring you back and show you a little bit more about that later. Just want to show this. One of the possible sources of the little interference is the thickness of the little button fastener there, that the crosshead bolt. This is the inside portion here, and as you can see, mine sticks up. It's probably sticks up about 15 or 16 thou above the crosshead, so it's plenty thick. It's thicker than it needs to be, so I'm going to file this down flush. That'll just be one more thing that will create a little bit of space, and it's probably, that may well be the contact point, because it's the most likely it hitting against this portion here. If you can see that, yeah, the little washer on the front connecting rod. I'm thinking that's where the interference is. We'll try that. Okay, I made some progress on the right hand side and the overall smoothness. I thinned out the head of the crosshead pin, as it were, reduced that in overall thickness, so it's less likely to interfere with the connecting rod. I also removed and thinned out this little button bearing a little bit too here in the front of the front driving wheel, and so now I can pretty smoothly turn the whole thing with one hand. There are a couple of little snug spots, but the pistons aren't engaged and the guides are not supported yet either. But anyway, I think this is in good shape here. My next move now is to flip to the other side and make some adjustments on that, probably thin out the little crosshead button, and just anything I can do to create a little space, because one thing I learned building my Allen Mogul is you don't want anything with a live steam locomotive. It has to have room to move. You know, it's the quintessential problem with the plans and stuff. Everything is to a tight tolerance, but then if you build it, there's got to be room to move. You have to play with it and let it, run it through its motion, so to speak. And I'll have to do this flipping it, with its weight on its wheels also. But making progress. All right, back at it. I've got, after addressing those little binding issues on both sides, I'm pleased to report that there's a lot smoother. It's not hanging up on anything. So the next step will be to fasten the piston rods with some screws. LBSC talks about drilling a hole and pounding a piece of metal in there as kind of a rivet, but I'd rather put a screw in, so I drilled pilot holes in here in the crossheads for a 248 screw. So I'll do that, and I just want to show how relatively free everything is now. It's not binding at all. I mean, it'll turn all the way around, so that's the main thing. And so we'll fasten the pistons in, and then we'll flip it back over and check it out. We'll put the valve rods in and fasten the guides to the chassis. Get ready to set the timing. Okay, I still haven't pinned the pistons in place, but I did want to show that the movement is pretty smooth here. There's a wee bit of binding that, which is not really that uncommon when you have new rods and brand new bushings and stuff. They have to get worn in a little bit. But one thing I noticed is, since I'm not making the one with the Walschaerts gear, I need to make some kind of retainer for these, the rear rod. So I'm doing that right now. Looking at a couple of pictures, it looks like what people do is they just cut a little disc and drill a hole in it. So this is a 3/16 inch center portion and a 1/4 inch pin the bushing itself is a little bit larger, like 3/8. So what I've done is took a piece of 3/8 inch steel. Let me fast forward, just walk you over here. Put it in the lathe. This is just ordinary 12L14. I faced it off and cleaned it up with a file a little bit, and then drilled and reamed a 3/16 inch hole, a thou oversize actually, in the center. So now I'm going to take this out, take it over to the mill, drill and tap a couple of set screw holes, and then bring it back here and cut it off. Just a shot of here. I've got the 5C collet block in the mill and drilled and tapped the little 440 holes. Now back to the lathe and cut it off. That's the beautiful thing about having these collet blocks. You can see the metal never left the 5C collet there. Okay, let me show you that. Here's the little retainers that I made on the back part here. You can see I need to trim the little cone point screws down, but I got one on either side. And the chassis rolls really smooth now. I think part of the binding that was happening when I tested it before was the rods were moving out a little bit. So now, hey, I'm pleased as punch. This is really smooth. That's perfect. So now I can proceed with the rest of the assembly. Tomorrow night I'll put the packing on the pistons that goes in the groove here, and then put it all together, drill and tap the little holes through the piston rods to retain them in the crossheads, and I'll do the mounting for the little guide bar brackets. Let me show you this is a little tip. I keep my miniature screws in this fishing tackle box. It's a Plano. And you can get these at Walmart for like $3 or something, $3 to $5 depending on the size. But I got my 256s along this side, 348s down here, and I just write down the size 540s here. So all the miniature screws, I keep them all organized that way. And these are the little 440 cone point screws that I used in the to retain the rear bearings. Alright, off to the next thing. Next thing I need to do is to put the piston assemblies in, and in order to do that I need to take the piston and I need to put some graphited yarn, as Keith Appleton calls it around here. And let me show you a little bit. For those of you that are already live steamers, you'll be familiar with this stuff. Here's some 1/8 inch graphited yarn that I got from McMaster Carr. Palmetto Packings makes it. This part was made in China. It's a 5-foot hunk that I got. And the nice thing about this stuff is you can take it apart in the strands and use the individual strands to wrap around things like the valve glands and so forth. I bought this one years ago to use on my Allen Mogul, and I was tempted to just cram a bunch of this stuff, this 1/8 inch square stuff, into the piston on the Tich, but I decided after looking at McMaster's catalog, they sell this for, it's not much. I mean, I think it was something like $10 for a 5-foot roll of 3/16 inch material. It came in this nice box too. So anyway, I'm preparing to do this. According to LBSC, he says just cut a piece that's 1/4 inch longer in circumference than the place, and put a diagonal cut on the ends, and then cram it together. What I have in mind, and I'm going to cut and fit this first, but what I've used successfully in other similar endeavors is to put the piston rings on and then put something on as a compressor, a lot like you would see for an automobile ring. But don't put it all the way to the bottom, leave a little gap there, and then use something like a zip tie to hold it all steady for a little bit, so that you can enter the base of the piston into the cylinder, and then just kind of quickly cram the rest of it in, or push through the center here, and the sleeve keeps it compressed. The other consideration is to have the joint where the pieces come together away from any of the steam passages and stuff. So I'll probably put the joint over on this side you know, when it's inside the sleeve there. Hope that makes sense. I'm going to go ahead and try to cut this, and I'll turn the camera back on, but I wanted to talk about what I'm doing first before I actually try it, because I don't want to narrate while I'm trying to do it. Okay, take 4 of like trying to steam it. So I keep my excess steam cylinder oil. You can see how thick that stuff is just in my little spout in this old butter container. So I'm going to try, it's clean oil here, in case you're wondering. It's just excess. And this stuff is so expensive, I don't want to waste it. Alright, so now I'm using the oil, cram the graphited yarn, making a complete mess of my fingers. Good thing I already ate dinner. Alright, hopefully you can see that. The oil is helping it all stay in there. It's crammed in good, honestly. And there's plenty of excess too, so it's not like I have to worry about a part of it not sealing. Just have a worry about it all cramming in there. So let's try. If I put a little oil in the cylinder, it would help. Couldn't hurt, right? Look how thick that steam cylinder oil is. It's crazy thick. It's like molasses. Also switched my position, so I'm in a different spot. Maybe if I could just, come on, just cram it in there. Yes, it's going in now. Alright. Okay, that worked. I think that'll make a good seal. I don't want to get any oil on the base there, because my idea is to crazy glue the thing in place. Alright. I'm not sure how well that'll work in reality, and you know, some viewers have suggested even other things, you know, O-rings, and so there's a lot of other sealing things, but so I ended up using the 1/8 inch after all. Guess I wasted the money on the 3/16. I'll try it on the other side, but we'll go with that for now. Hey folks, I watched a Keith Appleton video and I saw a better technique for this process. I wish I would have captured it on tape, but I didn't, so let me describe it for you. I used some of the 3/16 inch graphite. I put some steam oil on the piston in the groove first, then I cut a piece of the graphite, used my rubber mallet to tap it into the groove. Once that was done, then I compressed the graphite with this cable tie, got it smashed down enough. I put some steam oil in the cylinder and some more on the outside of the graphited yarn, and then I tapped it into place with this little wooden dowel rod to get the piston to go inside. Now it was much more snug than this one, and I'm not sure it's going to be perfect or not, because a lot of the graphite stuff did flake off. You can see it down here as I tapped it in, so there was some that came loose, so it wasn't a perfectly clean thing, but it does move. It's a little snug. It's way more snug than the one on this side. This side moves easier, so I'm not sure, but I'll kind of do it as an experiment now and just see which one works better. I can always, if this is good, I can always redo this side, and if this side's not good, I can always redo this side like the other one. So we'll see, but I thought I'd share that technique, and thanks again to Keith Appleton. If I can find it, I'll put a link to his video in this one. Next step is to install the little guide bar brackets. So I've got the piston at the back dead center. So you can see it all. The piston travel is all the way back. That stabilizes the guide bar. And the little guide bar bracket fits on here. I've got a place marked where it's supposed to go. I'm going to hold it, and I've blued the bottom, as you can probably see there. So I'm going to set it in place, and just like LBSC talks about, to use a little scriber. This is one of those little import, probably Harbor Freight dental type scribers. Scratch it around good. Hopefully I have a good center marking. Let's see. There we go. So I don't know if you can see that, but a nice little spot where the hole needs to go. So now I'll just set this up and drill and tap for 440. And my plan is to use these little tiny countersunk 440 screws that I got from my favorite hardware store. And because the bottom of the guide bar bracket is already countersunk for the 440. So let's see how that goes. Once I had the hole marked with the angled scribe, then I used my center punch to make a nice hole there, and I put it in the vise kind of upside down, and I used my little baby square here to make sure I had the angle correct. So now I'll just drill this out with a number 42 drill and tap it for 440. Just about done tapping the last hole for the number 256 screw that will hold the right side guide bar bracket to the chassis. I drilled a couple of holes, or drilled a tap size hole, I think number 50, something like that, using the Dremel here, and then I drilled it out a little bit. That's what the larger drill is for, just to make a little clearance through the bracket. And now I'll put the 256 screws in before I release the clamp. And I did, before I drilled and tapped the holes, after I tightened the clamp down, I did run it through its cycle one more time just to make sure the alignment was right. I think I'll end this episode right here. All I need left to do to complete this phase of the project is to remove these entire assemblies here, the piston assemblies, then get to the drill and tap the little 256 hole. Here's an example of a 256 screw that I was going to use to screws to hold the piston rod in place in the crosshead. And I'll probably do that this afternoon or tomorrow, but I'll have to take all this apart, and I really don't want to do that right now. So I'll end this week's episode there, and the next things we'll be talking about really after this, after I put those screws in place, will be to build some of the piping system that goes in the locomotive. And there it is. There's the little T set, that intake and exhaust, and then the piping in the lubricator as well. That all goes up here, and we'll be getting close to ready to run on air. I will show you one thing I did last night after I put all this together. I got my removed this valve rod. It was not much clearance between the little valve mount and the valve rod itself, so I used the Dremel and just ground away some space there, so there's plenty of clearance there. There was already plenty on the other side, just didn't need to worry about that. But let me show you got good motion on all of this, doing it one hand, and that one, like I said, that one piston is pretty stiff that I've got the 3/8 inch packing in. But anyway, all right folks, well thanks for being part of this journey. I will keep you posted as we make progress. Have a great week.